Welcome to the Freight Project Podcast, brought to you by Cerasis, a North American third-party logistics company providing shippers transportation management, technology, and solutions.
On today's The Freight Project Podcast episode, we have back the Cerasis Freight Desk Manager to speak about what his department is up to now and how Chris was able to come into Cerasis 4 years ago and help the freight desk scale by leveraging technology, metrics, and good communication. Chris lays out how a shipper could mirror what Chris did to scale during explosive growth at Cerasis so that shippers may leverage freight resources more effectively and so that our freight desk can aid, without a misstep, our customers in achieving their goals. I hope you enjoy this episode of the Freight Project Podcast. Chris, thanks for being back on the Freight Project Podcast once again. I think you're now tied with Roger for most appearances with four.
All right.
So you are in the raffle for the brand new Mercedes, and you and Roger have a high chance of winning it. So just if you're going to come on the Freight Project Podcast, do remember that at the end of this, and I'm not sure when that date will be, there will be a drawing for Mercedes. So if you haven't been a guest yet, reach out to us. We'd love to feature your voice. I say that because Chris and I both just got new cars. We're both dudes who don't always treat ourselves.
Nope.
And so we both treated ourselves a little bit. We deserve it. We're darn near 40, the both of us. So it was time for us to hit that midlife crisis and double down on a car.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again for being here. And, today I really wanted to have you on because I feel like from a management perspective, we are kindred spirits. And it's a topic that I think both you and I seem quite obsessive about. And I believe it's paid dividends in both the departments that we manage. And just as a reminder, I'm the marketing manager at Cerasis. You probably knew that as you hear my voice week to week. But Chris is the freight desk manager. And so if you think about Cerasis as a company, our goals are nearly identical to nearly all the shippers out there from a management perspective. We want to scale our business. We want to leverage our resources effectively so we're able to yield a higher bottom line for the company so that, we have profits that we can then reinvest back into the business and have it grow sustainably. However, from my perspective, I had the opportunity to come into a clean slate. I had nobody here before me. I was able to scale and maximize marketing resources almost immediately. But your path was taking up the realm of a freight desk manager from someone before when our company was really in the middle of explosive growth. You were tasked with creating a more proactive, responsive freight desk that scales and leverages your resources in order to provide the best experience for our customers. So that in turn, we hold up our marketing and sales promises, and we can make our shippers' inbound shipping much more efficient and allow their business to have confidence in the freight department so they themselves can leverage resources more effectively, scale, and realize that bottom line just like we're trying to do. But before we got into how you went about that, let's first level set to make sure we're all on the same page here. As the freight desk manager, can you describe in total what your department does for our customers?
Sure, Adam. I can definitely get into what the freight desk does. It's kind of a wide-ranging department. First off, I'll touch on what the face of the freight desk, which is our routing group. They take inbound phone calls and emails mostly from our vendors, and then we route inbound shipments to our customers. How that impacts our customer is that we do fast, accurate shipments with that routing group so that we can get those shipments done and scheduled same day, and that the freight's going in the right direction, which is mostly to our customer. We do not want to be delivering freight to any other party but our customer when it's not warranted, and we do our best to try to do that. Our tracking group here within Cerasis Freight Desk, they make sure that the shipments get picked up. How that impacts our customer is that if the freight's not picked up at our vendor, it's not arriving to our customer in most cases. So they don't have the raw materials they need in order to do what they need to do to ultimately create what they need to create to send off to our customer's end customer. So very important there to the success of our customers is making sure that freight gets picked up. So we have the freight routed, we have it scheduled, we make sure it gets picked up, And then we have a group, our in-transit group handles anything that's happening to the freight, quite logically, while in transit. So what that group does is they make sure that there's no, if there's freight's lost, if it's damaged, if it's moving the wrong direction, any number of issues that come up while that freight is moving, they make sure that it is handled in a quick and expedited process in order to not lose any additional transit days to what it may have already done. And that helps our customer again in terms of making sure that a freight arrives to them as quickly as possible. Now, we have two other areas that have rolled under me recently, which handle more of our larger shipments, which is our volume and our truckload group. Those are, kind of in larger shipments than what is handled by our routing group, but still kind of the same process. And same with truckload. Obviously, it's a full truckload shipment. And how we impact our customers there is with the truckload group, we're trying to find ways to move large quantities of freight at a cheap cost with a carrier that is safe to use and meets our expectations on a carrier perspective and from a company perspective. And our volume group is thinking outside the box to try to find those shipments that hug the line between LTL to truckload, try to find the best ways to move them at a effective price point so we can pass those savings along to our customers. So once again, wide-ranging group, great group of individuals. I couldn't ask for anything more. And they make me look good, which in the end is what I'm looking for.
That's right. Hey, as long as Chris looks good. No, exactly. It's about the customers.
No, those guys are great.
And it takes a lot of orchestration to get all of that done. A lot of processes, and not different than a lot of what, all the shippers out there are having to try and achieve on their own. So, now let's get into what you had to do in order to get to this point, because I came, a couple years before you did. And I got to tell you, what you just described was not necessarily reality 7 years ago. And so I think it's important to have our audience, especially those shippers out there that are growing their business. They're looking to scale freight management as freight managers. And it is evident that those companies who can master logistics well are those that can compete. Just look at Amazon's growth thanks to their logistics. They've really changed the expectations in the ability to make logistics a competitive advantage. So can you describe the environment of the freight desk when you came in, and then what vision or strategy you employed to get to where you are today?
Sure. When I joined Cerasis about 3.5 years ago, we had a team of highly skilled individuals, but we're all kind of operating independent of each other. So there was we had a bunch of ringing phones and an email queue that was overloaded. But when it actually hit those individuals' hands, they had the wherewithal and the ability to process the request accurately, but no one person did it in any sort of consistency with the person next to them. So when I came on board, I saw that as a bottleneck in the scalable solution. So what we've employed over the last several years here are repeatable, trainable solutions from the onboarding process all the way on through, so that each individual is giving the same consistent message, regardless of if you've been here 15 years or you've been here 9 months, so that, we are instilling confidence in our customers that even if we have a new individual, that the procedure, the process are in place for them to be successful right out of the gate. And then we looked into, after we trained, after you get them on board, we looked a lot into metrics and quantitating what it is that each individual does. regardless if they're in the in-transit group or the routing group or they're in our volume or truckload area. We have, in most areas, we have metrics in place to measure the success, of the department. And that structure, it gives agents a goal to shoot for. And when you make agents aware of a metrics or a key performance indicator, they tend to, pull those numbers down and make them more efficient and tighten them up right away. So, we bring in things such as handle time. We do a quality review. We do speed to answer in how quickly we turn around a request that comes into our department. We look at several things that lead to the success of our department. And I believe that if you couple training with KPIs and metrics, that gets everybody on the same page and doing things and pulling in the same direction, which creates an environment for scalable growth. Without those, you have one individual that may know a lot, but isn't either sharing or doing the same things as two or three other individuals on the same team, and that harmony isn't quite there. And without that, you can't grow at large scale rate.
Man, I think that's such a key point. Having the team, like in a tug of war match, all pulling the same way. And if somebody comes off that line and gets some water and you expected that they'd all be pulling the same way, it makes you less effective in the long run and you can't reach your goals. So I think that's a super salient point that you made, and it creates an important culture. And so that was your vision and your strategy, and you used metrics as a great guide in order to reinforce that learning, a little bit like grades in high school. And I'm doing that now with my son who's in 7th grade, and his first grade, really, where they're having to be thinking about complex ideas along the way until they get to a quiz or a test. It's not just micro tests. There's kind of long periods of time where you're learning new things or you're doing something. And then there's an end result grade to assess how you were able to retain it. And we had to develop, a plan. We had to say, look, we understand this is more difficult and he's involved in other activities that take his time. So it was all about letting him know that these are just performance assessments. Now, the thing we need to teach you is that plan and that way of studying that allows you to absorb information to where it's not too much of an overload, but that it's done a little bit at a time, and that the end goal and the vision is key. But what's also really important is how we get there, and then saying, okay, what's the assessment on what we executed? And so it sounds like
you don't teach to the test. Yeah, you don't teach the test. You teach the preparation that gets you to the test.
Yep. 100%. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And when people get that and they see at the end result this measurement that's, great, or that they can at least evaluate and say, where are my shortcomings to continue to improve? And you're all pushing towards that same way, then you truly are able to see that team move in the right direction. Okay, so I have to assume with all of these new processes, with this strategy, you had to actually start executing it beyond the vision and the plan. And so often it takes getting some buy-in from leadership. How did our leadership support you in these changes? And how did you effectively justify changes and other investments in tools or even more bodies to pull off the vision?
Absolutely. Great question, because at Cerasis here, the previous Freight Desk Manager, although a great resource during her tenure here, didn't have the contact center management and customer service management background that I did. And when I came on board, because I had those skill sets that they were looking for, that they haven't had before, I don't want to say they gave me free range, but they allowed me to do what I felt was necessary to move the department in a direction that I felt it needed to move in. And to your point, you reference, justifying technology and justifying bodies and individuals. Those are two huge areas that I focused on from the get-go. In order to capture these metrics, these numbers, these KPIs, in order to utilize scalable solutions, you have to have the backbone of a technological platform that can support these things in place. And when I came on board, we did not have that within our ticketing software where our emails come in, or our phone software that our incoming phone calls came in. They didn't capture the data to get to those metrics and KPIs that allowed us then to train, scale, and coach the way that we needed to. So I had to justify reasons for spending money on a new ticketing software and the benefits that those would provide us. Luckily, our great IT manager, Darwin Porter, was able to do the justification and for the spending on our phone system. But in conjunction with those two things, we have done a great deal of work in bringing in technology that supports my vision of a scalable department built off of KPIs and metrics. But then, you have that in place. Okay, great. Now you got to get people, the frontline agents, our freight desk agents, to buy into, the fact that these are important. Well, in order to do that, I needed extra individuals to help execute my goal from a leadership perspective. So, justifying team leads that report to me, some of which you've spoken to on this podcast. I needed to go to our senior leadership group and justify, I have a vision in place. I have the technology in place. I just need now someone to focus their attention on training and coaching the frontline agents that will to the results that our systems can now pull in. And that took some time, especially with the first one. And I had to, kind of justify where my time was being spent, how my time was being utilized, and then let them know where I was wanting the department to go and and the fact that I didn't have enough time in the day to do that. Once they got everything kind of pulled together, this team at Cerasis, the senior leadership group from Steve and Noral and Ludvigson on down, has really been able to, they bought into what I've been selling them, and we've been able to move the department in that right direction. But without the second level of leadership here with our team leads, and without the tools and technology, we couldn't have done the scalable solutions that we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit more about those people. Some, they were new to Cerasis and were hired specifically for that lead position. Some kind of come up through the ranks through experience, and some, stay in their positions and were here close to the founding of the company. Some a decade even before you showed up. And, I think you kind of hit on it before, but let's focus in on it. You had to take some existing staff who had been here in different ways of thinking and visions, and frankly, at a really smaller type of company, and you had to get them to adopt that overall vision and help you make that change. And it can't be just alone that implements the vision and strategy. It takes a team. So how did you really get them to buy into it? Did you have any people who were resistant, or did you get lucky and everybody were like, "You sound smart, Chris. Sure, let's do it."
I was lucky. I think it's when you are going through this type of change management process, especially with a group of tenured individuals that have been with the company longer than you have, or I have, I should say. It was difficult to get some of the buy-in at first. Not impossible, no real rebellion, but it's a new guy coming in. You got to kind of, show that you have an understanding of what's going on with the team. But I think what's important to note with some of the early buy-in is that you don't have to get everybody to buy in. Find a few key individuals, key frontline agents to buy in, and then they will help spread that message to their peers, so it's not projecting down from myself to other individuals. It's projecting across the aisle from one peer to another on a frontline level. And I found that to be a successful approach to getting that initial buy-in from some of the agents. And then also, you hit some low-hanging fruit. They see some successes on some early implementation things that don't have a huge impact into their day-to-day. And and then that starts building that momentum. You have initial buy-in from key people. You hit some low-hanging fruit. You show that you know what you're talking about, and then you start layering on different processes that are a little bit more difficult than others. If I would have came in here 3.5 years ago and said, okay, we're going to start monitoring all your calls. You're going to get scored on these calls. You're going to have hand time goals. You need to wrap up a ticket in X amount of time. You need to answer the phone in Y amount of time. I wouldn't have had any of that buy-in from that group. It would have been a disaster. But, talking to key individuals about what my vision was going to be, and then, implementing a few things that helped achieve some early onset goals really assisted in that process. Quite frankly, it didn't work with everybody here. Some people chose, opportunities outside of the company. Some people chose to go to other areas inside the company, which I find very positive, that maybe better fit their skill set, and they're still here working for Cerasis. But it was creating a different culture, and they're not everybody it's not going to fit everybody. And then finally, with the addition of the team leads, you have individuals in those positions that are able to facilitate what you are looking for to those frontline agents, and that vision just keeps going. I am very fortunate that one of the leads I hired, the first lead that I hired, has the same background as I do and sees things the same way I do, which is great. It's allowed for great development in our routing group. Our in-transit and tracking team lead was developed from within Cerasis, and so they understand that as well. And then my third lead, from a volume and truckload perspective, I inherited, but it was a great hire by their former manager, and we've been able to propel the vision forward as well. So you don't always get the buy-in that you want. You hope for the best, and when people do leave, you replace them with individuals that don't know anything differently as well, and you can kind of mold them in a way that you want them to work within the company. And we started as a team of 9. We're now in the 30s, and we have turnover, both external and internal, as I referenced. But everybody that has come through here, is seeing things the same way now. So after some initial bumpy phases taken off, we are smooth sailing with what that vision is right now.
And I have a feeling that it's less about culture. It's kind of an underlying thing, meaning you're not sitting there and talking about culture all the time, mainly because it's one of those things that maybe the group sees as a shared thing inherently now. It's just a part of their day-to-day work. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's, the understanding of what the requirements of this position or positions with all the different areas we have is very well understood. The individuals we have here now, both tenured and, relatively new, all understand the same type of focus, the same type of attention to detail, the same type of things that from a quality perspective that we talk about. And there's not as much of any of that kind of talk as there once was. So it's a hard process. I'm not going to lie. I don't want to sound like this is the world's easiest thing to do. It's a hard process for change management with a large group of individuals, but it's necessary to have the structure in place before you scale, or else as you scale, you're building on a shoddy foundation. And no, I did not swear.
Shoddy. Hey, it could be like The Good Place. I don't know if you've seen that show, but
oh, absolutely.
That's a shirt load of work for sure.
Exactly. It is.
Right, so it sounds like continual work is really important, that it's not something you can take for granted and that you reinforce all the time. And it sounds like you put in metrics in place as a good lightning rod, as a gauge to see how the team is doing. And you alluded to, or actually you specifically mentioned, if you had just come in and said, I'm monitoring you with these metrics, you may have not been successful, but we can't discount the importance of metrics and data capture. So I find amazing that after you drove home your vision and you scaled the department, that you automatically knew that you had to get data points. So your team, I think, saw that their work was paying off and how that they could improve. So first, what kind of metrics do you guys track? And why is it key that you go over these with your people and talk about it?
Sure. We track a lot. And each group, is, and different metrics are made visible to different groups. So I don't want to go too deep into, each individual metrics that we follow for each group, but I will spend some time and talk about the one overarching metric that we use, which is our service quality program that we have in place or will soon be in place for every single one of the departments here underneath the freight desk. So I'll spend some time talking about that and why that is important. Our service quality program, we pull at random, anywhere from 6 to 10 shipments per month, review those shipments to make sure that we are inputting the data. We are responding back with professionalism. We are doing what is required, not just to move the shipment, because you can get shipments moving and still not have all the necessary information. We hold our agents to a higher standard than that. We want to make sure that they are doing everything that allows us to capture those data points and allows us to not have as many potential for errors with carriers or anything along those lines. So it's a fairly detailed and rigorous process that we then, score the call behind the scenes or the email transaction or interaction, whatever the case may be. And then we take that data and we bring it back to our agents and we talk to them, and we go over that particular interaction with them. We go through the email, we review their internal notes. And if it's a phone call that came into our department, we listen to the phone call together so that they are constantly in lockstep with how we have these programs calibrated. They understand that they need to repeat back transactions to avoid errors. They understand that they need to log shipper IDs in our system so we can understand how much time we're spending, per customer or per situation type. Because we don't take a step back in how we are coaching individuals on our quality, they all understand what is necessary to do in order to make for a successful transaction. Once again, not just getting the freight moving, but making sure that we are doing all the necessary steps that we require of them to make that transaction successful.
And it's just like, let's say your body and you're exercising, and you and I, again, we're both active in taking care of ourselves and wanting to be around for a while because we love life. But you've got to have, if you have a plan of being healthy, that's a big fat word, right? And I think having a good culture or a good company can be fat words. But when you start to break it down and say, okay, the vision and the strategy is for me to have a healthy, happy, sustainable life. And a part of that is my physical health. And so I know I have to have certain inputs like water, eating the right caloric intake, made up of proteins, carbohydrates, and fat. I need to have a good output system that's exercising. Even within exercising, I need to pay attention to my body so I don't overdo it. And then I give it time to heal and recover or do the things necessary to recover. And I think we have metrics around that we're not, I think once we shy away from those metrics, like if you start gaining weight and you're like, I don't want to get on the scale or I don't want to look at my blood pressure or anything like that, you start to it makes it easier to not execute on what you need to execute to reach your goals. And you can't be scared of looking at them. But I think if you have an overarching culture, vision, and strategy to support what you're looking at in these numbers and that you inspect what you expect, and everybody's on the same page that these aren't punishment numbers, right? They're just evaluation numbers.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think it's important to note, because I love the analogy, if we were to shy away from, what the results were when we first rolled this program out and in the struggles we had with, each individual department hitting their goals, and the struggles we had with properly calibrating what it is that we were looking for, we never would have got on that scale again. We never would have, looked at the nutritional values again, to use your analogies. We would have walked away and, chalked it up as something that maybe didn't work for our group or didn't work for Cerasis. We tried it, didn't work. We stuck with it, and you have to stick with it through the good and the bad, because coaching and follow up and training is the backbone to you giving yourself a scalable department that is all moving in the same direction. Otherwise, you're back to a bunch of ringing phones and an overflowing email queue like you walked into 4 or 5 years ago.
That's right. Well, I'm glad you're doing that. One, at Cerasis, it makes our company more profitable. At the end of the day, it makes us more successful, more proactive. Therefore, it makes our customers happy. I'm able to easily market you guys and what you do. Hence why I have you and all your teammates on this podcast. And thank you for lending them to me from time to time. But let's bring it back to the shipper, the freight manager that might be listening to this today. Let's say you, not a salesperson, was meeting with a freight manager about Cerasis. What would be the first question you ask them to understand their practice better? And what would be your one piece of advice to get them started to do what you did, maybe leveraging resources better, implementing their own visions of scale, so that at the end of the day, they also see better overall operations for freight?
That's a great question. I think as I look at our department, I would ask, what are you tracking currently? What numbers are you pulling currently? And what story do those numbers tell? And if you aren't pulling, shipment totals, tendencies, what are the trends? If you don't have some of that in a easily sortable, easily digestible way of capturing the data, then it's really hard to get at where your problem areas lie. So that'd be the first thing that I would look at, is what are you capturing and how are you storing that information? Secondly, I would ask, okay, I see you have some consistencies, you have some different shipping trends. How are you putting this together? How are you inputting the data? How are you, when you actually have to, schedule a shipment or stage a load, what are you doing? And does what you think you are doing, does that translate to what maybe your frontline employees are doing? And if I ask them, are they going to give me a similar answer to what you have provided? It's never going to be one-to-one. It's just not. But is there going to be enough correlation to what your vision is of what they're doing to the front line? And if there's a large gap in there, to me, then you focus back down on those training and coaching pieces of things, because, if I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. We're just too busy to do any sort of training. We're too busy to do any coaching. That's, to me, that can't waver. And otherwise, the scalable solutions for your group are going to be splintered, and you're going to have a bunch of individuals doing a bunch of things a different way. And you're not going to be as efficient in doing what you need to do without understanding how everyone's doing it and what it is that you're tracking.
That's right. And I think that's some great advice there. And I think what is not said around all of this in what you do at Cerasis and what other leaders of departments are doing at these shippers companies is that when you're able to show a department to go from here to the vision and execute it well, and everybody else in the company sees that, it raises the level of everybody else in their own departments. I see what you do, Chris, and it makes me want to showcase you all and that great work more and more. It makes me want to implement it in my department. And I think today's environment, if you're a company, at the end of the day, customer experience is make or break for everything that you're trying to do as a company. No matter if you're Cerasis, who's helping shippers, or Target, who gets you your groceries for the week. Great Minnesota company as well, by the way. But, we all are geared towards making that customer happy. And I think, it's easy to get lost and anxious at that big, fat goal. But if you kind of break it down, have a vision, talk with your people, look at the data, and keep at it every day, and don't let short-term pains steer you away from tugging that rope at the same direction as your team, then it seems like you can find that success. So thank you, Chris, again, for coming on the Freight Project podcast. You always have such great insight that's applicable beyond freight. So our listeners are appreciative. So thanks again.
No problem. I appreciate being on here any chance I can get. And it's always a pleasure talking with you, Adam.
Yeah, you too. Well, have a great day. And for all of our listeners here on the Freight Project podcast, thanks for tuning in each week. We'll see you on the next one.